I always answer this question. When people say, what's the difference between urban and rural homelessness? I say nothing other than the visibility. People would argue with me and say there's no homelessness. I've lived here for generations. There's no homelessness. We've never seen anybody homeless. They don't want to have their former soccer coach or cousin or former kindergarten teacher walk by them, so they just don't sleep on streets.
Just because it's one homeless person, solving homelessness is complicated.
They found that the prevalence of homelessness was 1 to 5 times higher in some rural, remote, and northern communities than the 3 largest urban centers in Canada. When we first started our program, young people were able to rent rooms for about $400 a month, and that was just 5 years ago. That's now doubled, so you can't rent a room in Lanark County for less than $800 a month. We adopted a housing first model and saw a significant reduction in youth homelessness by being able to provide rent supplements and help young people find apartments. We need 3.5 million houses built over the next 5 years to bring back affordability. So the solutions are the same, whether it's urban or rural, right? I think that the solution is housing, which needs money.
Rural homelessness is real. It's growing and it's being ignored. In this episode, I'm joined by my friend Terrilee Kelford. She's a registered psychotherapist, chair of the Cornerstone Landing Youth Services, and one of the leaders behind Canada's National Alliance to End Rural and Remote Homelessness. Terrilee has spent decades working with youth in rural towns where there are no shelters, no services, and too often, no acknowledgement that homelessness even exists. We talk about the hidden nature of rural homelessness, why youth are being put on buses and dropped off in cities, and what it really takes to build solutions in small communities. If you think homelessness only exists in cities, this conversation will change that. So we are talking for quite some time about me coming up to rural Ontario.
Yes.
To do some storytelling on rural homelessness.
Yes.
And that never happened because COVID hit.
Right.
And here we are doing a podcast talking about rural homelessness.
Yes.
So the universe balances itself out.
And you did take a trip.
I did.
To rural Ontario.
To real rural Ontario.
Yes.
We went to Pembroke, and it's a community of 14,000, right?
Yep.
No homeless services officially, really. I mean, there's a faith-based organization that runs a kitchen drop-in center. Very nice, very nice. I thought it was had a good spirit to it. It was clean, it was friendly. People were treated with dignity. I was very impressed by that.
Yeah.
But here again, you have a community where homelessness is growing. There's really no support. Even the kitchen drop-in center, which is all they had, the community's trying to close.
Yeah.
I mean, it just doesn't make any sense.
Yeah, they were getting a lot of pushback. In fact, the people that we talked to were quite openly concerned about that as well. Right. Quite aware of the fact they were being watched.
Right. Well, I mean, it was also the staff member that said there might be some issues and they didn't even know if they were going to even be able to do a warming center. Here, it's vital because the weather gets so cold.
Yeah, agreed.
Yeah.
Yeah, it was cold the day we were up there, and that's not cold.
For me, it was freezing. I've got California blood. So how did you start rural homelessness? You're a city girl, right? Ottawa?
Not born and raised, though. So I was born in the town of Perth, which is a small town of 6,000, about an hour west of Ottawa. Working there and working in the county of Lanark, which is what I do. Yes, I drive out there. Not quite as far as Pembroke, though. It's really only about a half an hour for me to get out to work. But in Lanark County, we, 25 years ago, started talking about youth homelessness because the service providers out there were saying, we have no services or supports or solutions for youth homelessness. So they were putting kids on buses and shipping them to the city to drop them off at a shelter.
Ottawa, Toronto.
Ottawa or Kingston. Yeah,
Okay.
either one. I think they gave some choice in that to the young people. But, you know, in the city of Ottawa, too, the bus station is nowhere near the shelters. I remember one time getting a call from an agency saying, someone put a young person on a bus and sent them to the city, but they're at the bus station. They have no idea how to get, they have no money to get to the shelters. There's no cabs, no cash. And so she was 5 months pregnant and 23 years old. So I went and picked her up at the bus station and took her back to Lanark County again because there was no buses back after 6 o'clock. So she would have been sleeping overnight. So very sad picture, with a little antique suitcase and a black garbage bag full of clothes, this little piece of paper that someone had given her with the addresses of shelters on them because of those stories,
Connected
right?
To the youth homelessness.
Yeah, and agencies, saying we need to do something about this. I co-founded a community coalition called the Transitions Action Coalition about 25 years ago with another counselor from the area. So we collected all all the agencies that worked with young people and functioned as a collective or a committee for about 10 years, and then realized we had to incorporate. We needed to be able to have grants and build programs and do those pieces. So that's eventually how it became Cornerstone Land and Youth Services, of which I'm the chair of the board.
So you're involved in both youth homelessness and rural homelessness?
Yes.
And how does that connect?
All the work that we do with Cornerstone Land Youth Services is in Lanark County, which are all rural areas. Yes, there's no city center in the municipality of Lanark County. It's all towns and small communities. Yeah.
Because when I first met you, we were talking about the homeless youth, and then all of a sudden you started talking about rural, and I'm like, what?
Right.
She's in Ottawa.
Right, yeah. So I moved out of the town of Perth when I was about 26 and moved to Ottawa. So I live in Ottawa, and yet I work in Lanark County, rural Lanark County.
Yeah. So tell me about rural homelessness in Canada. And it's very similar to rural homelessness in the States.
Yes. So I always answer this question. When people say, what's the difference between urban and rural homelessness? I say nothing other than the visibility. So we have people sleeping outside in tents. We have tent encampments. We have people in cars and campers. And we have people couch surfing. And we have people in hotels. So it's very similar to what it is in the cities. It's just you don't see people. Okay. So a little easier to hide in small towns. As you saw when you went to Pembroke with me, one of the people that you interviewed, they said it's a 30-minute walk down a trail to get to their encampment.
They're hidden a little more.
Yes,
because part of it in an urban community, it's cement and buildings, right? And you can't hide as well. You still have to be close to something so that you can get support, whether that be a place to panhandle or get food or see doctors or whatever. So you can't be too far out.
Right, yeah.
I mean, you want to be where you feel safe.
Right, yeah. You know, we asked young people years ago when we were first setting up Cornerstone Landing their opinion around supports and services. And one of the reasons why they said they don't sleep on streets is because they don't want to have their former soccer coach or cousin or, former kindergarten teacher walk by them. So they just don't. The anonymity in small towns is very difficult. So
that's what I was going to say is everybody knows each other.
Yeah, everybody knows everybody.
Right. Yeah. And it's because Jillian, who I interviewed, started saying some very harsh things about the town.
Right.
And I had to clarify, did you relocate here?
Right.
And she's like, no, I was born and raised, right? So I know this town. And
right. Yeah, and there's multi-generations of families living in small towns. And so when I first started talking publicly about youth homelessness in Lanark County about 15 years ago, people would argue with me and say there's no homelessness. I've lived here for generations. My family's been here. There's no homelessness. We've never seen anybody homeless. Yeah. So I think we're past that now. I think people accept the fact that there are people sleeping outside in almost every town in Lanark County and probably every town across Canada from what I'm hearing.
The big issue, and you can explain this more, is that rural areas do not get the support urban areas do. For example, we're very close to Jefferson County, New York, that I know is a large county, but it's a rural county, mostly farmers. In the whole county, no homeless services.
Right.
In the whole county, because they don't have the homeless count to get federal or even state dollars.
Yeah, well, that's what eventually led from me working as the chair of the board of Cornerstone. And when I say working, we're unpaid, but we're a working board. So we didn't have funding for a manager even until just last year. So we were all actually running the organization on free time as board members. So that work prompted me, encouraged me to then start the national work. So that's where the National Alliance to End Rural and Homelessness came in, because I was frustrated by the lack of funding, frustrated by the conversation around homelessness always revolving around urban centers, and frustrated by this perception that there was no issue.
That's how we started on this conversation. I like to target stories, conversations, topics on what's not being covered. And the hidden homeless families, queer, trans, both adult and youth, and rural homelessness are stories that I don't think are covered enough. So that's how we started this conversation. It's harder to connect, harder to find. So I really prioritize those stories.
Right, yeah. Well, from your experience of driving up to Pembroke now too, right? I think you did 2 interviews in the end, and they say there's about 35 people sleeping rough in that town on a given, but it's really hard to find them, right? And so it was suggested to us that we go and drive down the main street and go check out the Tim Hortons, go to but you can't find people unless they, are out.
Yeah. I mean, so Canada is a colder climate, and everybody has a backpack and a winter coat. Thinking that homeless people look like bums, right, is not necessarily true. Yes, some people are a little more disheveled if you will, are hurting. But most homeless people try to take care of themselves. So you're walking down a main street, whether it's Ottawa or Pembroke, you really don't know who, which is one of the reasons I hand out socks. A homeless person will go, wow, white gold, thank you.
Right.
And, somebody that's housed will say, what? Why are you bothering me?
Right.
Yeah.
The program that we saw in Pembroke, they had a great clothing program there with a full closet too, right?
Oh, I was very impressed.
People are getting
Pizza looked good.
designer clothes and great food.
As homelessness grows, people are getting frustrated and they're pushing for laws that criminalize homelessness, which will only make the problem worse. Invisible People reaches more people, educating them on homelessness than all other homeless sector nonprofits and campaigns combined. But we do it on a limited budget. We don't have the funding they do. We are mostly funded by individual donations. And now that the economy is struggling, individual donations are disappearing, and we need you. I get it. You might not have the money to donate. Many people are struggling right now. Please share our content, share our videos. It really matters. And if you do have some funds and want to help be part of the solution to solve homelessness, please visit invisiblepeople.tv/donate. Our important work stops without you. So what are the numbers? Is it growing?
Well, this is a frustrating topic for me as well because of that national piece, right?
I'm intentionally bringing up we're friends, so I can bring up
You're intentionally provoking me.
Yeah. I'm trying to stir the pot there.
This is one of the pieces that we're advocating for at a national level, is that Canada has no federal data strategy for rural communities. So we don't really know what the numbers are. Certainly in the province of Ontario, the Canadian Alliance has advocated for using the by name list. So most municipalities have that. So I think we're getting some numbers from that as well. But rural communities really are neglected in that conversation. And, even our small little charity in Leonard County is trying to use a federal program called HIFIS, and we're being told we can't, literally not allowed to use the same system that the urban centers do unless we find a collection of other people that want to go in on it with us. So we don't know the numbers. And in fact, Canada often uses this number of 235,000 people homeless across the country, but that does not include any rural or small community of under 30,000.
And it's getting worse. I mean, you don't have to have the beans counted to know homelessness, rural and urban, is getting worse.
Yeah, and I think that's what's driving the tent to camp conversation that's happening in rural communities as well. So I've seen a few presentations this week at the conference about how to support folks living rough in small towns, small communities. And the services, again, are the same as the urban centers. They just have to look different, right? Like people are driving around in RVs to go find people, or using, four-wheelers to go down trails to find people to do that tent camp support, right?
Now, are you presenting?
I've been moderating sessions for the Rural Remote Stream, yeah.
How do we solve it? What can we do?
You're asking me that? Money.
Well, you're the rural homeless expert.
I don't call myself that. Money and housing. That's how we solve it.
You're the
housing
friend that I know that I trust to be honest, that talks about rural homelessness and knows what she's talking about, i.e. expert.
Nice to hear. I mean, the solutions are the same, whether it's urban or rural, right? I think the solution is housing, which needs money. CMHC in Canada says we need 3.5 million houses built over the next 5 years to bring back affordability. So, and that's certainly a conversation we're having about rural again, is how do we build housing in small towns when they don't require 200 units in one location, and they need small builds, and small towns also lack capacity and, expertise in terms of how to get builds done, lack of funding for rural communities. A lot of the federal programs don't work well for small communities in terms of getting funding to be able to build. So money and houses.
Yeah. What people don't realize is, and I'm going to use my hometown of Binghamton, New York, which is a town of about 40,000 people. The rents are almost Los Angeles big city level. There's a college there. If the college wasn't there, the town would be a ghost town. You have wealthy parents being able to pay a higher rent, and developers and landlords know this, so they keep raising the rent, so the people working at Taco Bell or wherever struggling just can't afford rents, and the rent in Pembroke or any place is going up.
Yeah, when we first started our program in Leonard County for youth, we were, young people were able to rent rooms for about $400 a month, and that was just 5 years ago. We adopted a housing first model and saw a significant reduction in youth homelessness by being able to provide rent supplements and help young people find apartments. But as soon as, the rent started started going up and COVID hit and there was a spike and increase in the prices, that's now doubled. So you can't rent a room in Lander County for less than $800 a month.
Yeah. You mentioned Housing First and youth. How does that work?
So in Lander County, we are mobile. So because we have our collection of, I think it's 12 municipalities and towns.
How big is the county?
80,000 total.
For the whole county?
For the whole county, yeah.
No way.
Yeah, 80,000.
Wow.
So, and towns as large as like 20,000, but also as small as like 100. So, or little hamlets and, villages along the way. So yeah, so about almost 80,000 across the county itself. So because there's no urban center, you really have to be providing services in all of those communities.
Right.
And we'll actually track where young people come from. And it is often townships. It's often the rural township that has no town center, right? So, so we decided that we were going to be mobile. So we go to the young people, not the other way around. They don't have to come to us. We have no office technically. And so our staff are hired to go out and provide supports to young people. We started providing rent supplements really quickly. We also had a lot of young people being supported by families in the county. So we wanted to be flexible. And so if a young person comes and says, hey, I've got this, the parents of one of my friends will take me in, but I don't have money for food, then we just help with that. We'll help them stabilize that place when they can.
How often does that happen?
Quite a bit, actually. In fact, we often hear family members saying, or individuals from the county saying, oh, I took one of my son's friends in for a few years when they were in high school. So I think it happens more than people talk about, right? They don't see it as homelessness, though, either. It's kind of like we're taking a friend in. So
I highlighted a youth organization in Los Angeles who I love, Safe Place for Youth, SPY, and they had a program that if there was an open bedroom that they're not using, that they would be vetted and then they would house a homeless youth or couples even was what I highlighted with this family. And they were very successful at it. And I thought maybe you need more because I know often, and this is not just rural homelessness, this is also urban homelessness, families can be the cause of homelessness.
Yeah,
especially with youth.
Agreed.
As we were talking with Alex, so many kids are kicked out. Are thrown out.
Yeah, we surveyed the young people that we were supporting about 5 or 6 years ago, and about a third of the young people had actually been in care, had been into the child welfare system. About a third had been investigated but not apprehended, and then another third had had no contact. But many of them had stayed with, at some point, parents of a friend or parents of a partner or some extended family member. So, and we've certainly had over the years people reach out to say, hey, we would take a young person in if you knew of anyone. So,
Couch surfing is much more common with youth. If I remember correctly. But also then you also have survival sex where kids are, just to have a safe place or a warm place.
Yeah, I think there's some studies provided by Covenant House, I believe, actually did some studies across North America. And I think they had said that 20% of all young people report that they've been approached for paid sex within 24 hours of being homeless.
What?
Yeah.
I could see that.
Yeah. I mean, I think shelters, certainly become known as a place to find vulnerable people, right? So
it's, I know from my work 20 years ago in Hollywood, you had about 2 weeks to get a runaway youth the help they needed before they would be picked up by a pimp.
Right.
What you would see often is this cute little girl is a commodity. But if she starts putting tattoos and piercings, and people don't know that, they look at it and they say, oh, that gutter punk kid, right? Those piercings cost money. They're rebellious, right? They're doing it for survival.
Right.
Because if they make themselves out to be a punk rock rebellious kid, they're not as much of a commodity.
Right.
And what people don't realize, at least in Los Angeles, there's a whole subculture of people that are learning to pierce that drive around and say, hey, come here, let me practice on you. So they're getting free piercings or free tats. It's their apprenticeship, if you would.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? And the kids, part of it is, hey, it's cool now, it's culture. But the other part is survival, so the pimps will leave them alone.
Yeah, agreed. Yeah, I think certainly, the young women I've supported over the years have either dressed down or covered up in layers or, there's a variety of ways that they try to make themselves invisible.
What can people do?
What I'm enjoying these days is the fact that more and more people are talking about rural homelessness. So thank you for these opportunities, because I think we had to get past that there is no rural homelessness issue, or it's a really minor issue, to actually leverage enough will to actually address it. We're there now, I think. There's enough will and understanding and empathy to the issue of rural homelessness that people will be more willing to do something about it, because it's not just politicians. As much as we'd like to complain about politicians, it's also the will of the voters and the public to be able to change attitudes and stigmas and all those pieces around homelessness, which is what you're doing,
and that's what I want to do. I would love to focus more on rural homelessness and rural homelessness for youth. And as I asked that question, it immediately hit me, because most people live in the city. They probably don't care about rural homelessness, or they think it's camping.
Right. Yeah, it's hard. It's hard to compete with. I won't mention any politicians' names, but I've met with some folks over the years who, work out of the city of Toronto, and they walk out their front door and they see 35 people in a tent encampment. So it's hard to compare that with my picture of one tent in Leonard County, Perth, and say we got to solve this issue. So we still live in the shadow a little bit in that regard.
But you would think one tent is easier to solve.
Matters just as much.
Yeah.
As the 30 tents, right?
I was chief marketing officer for a large nonprofit in Syracuse, New York. And when I moved there, somebody looked up in the data to see how many homeless people. I'm not a big data person. And they text me and they said, "You only have 8 homeless people."
Right.
You can solve that. You only have 8 homeless people. And they eventually had 12 and 20, and, it just kept on growing. So what I learned from that is, just because it's one homeless person, solving homelessness is complicated.
Yes.
Because people are complicated.
Yes.
The system to be able to provide a house is complicated.
Yes. Lack of services, lack of transportation, lack of visibility, all those pieces make it harder to solve sometimes, even if it is just one tent. There's a really fantastic study that Dr. Rebecca Schiff did, and Ashley Wilkinson and Jeanette Wagemaker-Schiff, in which they rolled up all the counts of homelessness that were actually done in rural and small and northern communities in Canada 2 years ago, I believe now they did this. And they found that the prevalence of homelessness was 1 to 5 times higher in some rural, remote, and northern communities than the 3 largest urban centers in Canada.
Is that partly also because Indigenous? Does that play into this at all?
Yeah, certainly some northern and remote communities have, 100% of the population is Indigenous for sure. And there's an overrepresentation right across the country, yeah.
So how do you get people to care? Having the conversation is great. Amplifying the conversation is great.
Doing what you're doing.
Yeah.
That helps.
I wish we had the resources to scale. We need to scale.
Yeah.
Our work has never been more important, but donations are down. And the homeless sector is investing multi-millions in what I do. Anyways.
Yeah, not in the stories, huh?
Yeah, another story, which is, Tim and Canadian Alliance has always been supportive, and that's how we've connected over the years.
Yeah, absolutely, yeah. It's interesting. I've talked to so many folks who have been coming to this conference for a few years now, because I think it's 11 years for the Canadian Alliance conference, and I was here in Ottawa for the very first one 11 years ago, and I don't know how many people were there, 400 or 500 maybe?
Yeah.
A couple hundred maybe even? I know it's pretty tiny actually, so
yeah.
It's amazing now to see it over 2,000 people in the room. So.
I was here for that, have some very powerful memories. Is there anything that you'd like to add?
No, just thank you for the work that you're doing. I think this really matters. Thank you for showing interest in hopping in the car and driving an hour and a half one way out to a small community to do a story.
Lunch.
So that's true. I did.
Yeah.
Yes. Yeah. It was a good little spot we went to, but it matters, right? And I think the problem is with us in a lot of rural communities too, we don't have an opportunity to do what you're able to do for us in some respects because of that stigma and because people are driven off the streets in small towns. It's really hard to get the stories, right? People are eager to share their story if given the opportunity. So you did that for some folks in Pembroke. So I'm really grateful for that. Sharing the stories changes attitudes, right? It makes people more compassionate, and more compassion means it will make the right decisions when it comes to voting for the right politicians, and the right politicians who are going to invest the right money into this.
Well, thank you very much for talking to me.
Yeah, thanks for having me. I appreciate you.